Did you forget what our people did when we left the Cape? Did you forget what our people did when we fought the biggest empire this world has ever seen? Did you forget that our people built this country and that we do not have to be ashamed of our past? Do not say sorry. Stop bowing. Do not dishonor the deeds of our fathers by saying sorry, by asking for apology. We are not that. We are not a guilty people.
My guest is a young Afrikaner, Francois van der Merwe, the leader of what most people would describe as a far-right or an ultra-right movement, called in Afrikaans the bitter einders, the bitter enders. Francois is an Afrikaner. I'm also an Afrikaner. I asked Francois if we could do this in English for the sake of a broader audience that we're trying to reach. He is in Pretoria, if I'm correct. Or did you say Krugersdorp? I'm not sure. Francois, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. I appreciate for you bringing me on. So there's two clarifications. Sorry to start the program like that. The first would be that I'm from Pretoria, and the second would be that the Bittereiners, our namesake comes from the people, or the Boere, that fought against the British in the Second Anglo-Boer War, or as we call it, Second War for Freedom, the Tweede Vryheidsоorlog. And these were the men that after the conventional part of the war, after about a year, when South Africa was totally basically occupied by the British, they were the guerrilla fighters that did not want to surrender, that refused to surrender. And the Bittereiners term could be the people that fight to the bitter end, or another translation can be the irreconcilables, the ones that will not bend, the ones that would never negotiate or take anything less than absolute freedom.
Well, something else that I will just add to this in the name Bittereinders and where the Bittereinders come from is that, and you refer to the Anglo-Boer War, Nelson Mandela himself said on many an occasion that the Afrikaners, the Boers, the Bittereinders were in fact the first freedom fighters of South Africa. I think some people claim the Khoisan would be the first. I think they might be correct, but certainly Mandela recognized and had profound respect for the Afrikaners, for the Bittereinders who fought in the Anglo-Boer War. I want to talk to you about South Africa today, and I want to talk to you about the sort of new focus that we have here in Europe on South Africa. Again, an enormous amount of focus as a result of Trump's executive order.
So I believe there's two, let's say, ways of looking at it, or two opinions that people have. The one is very, very positive in the fact that, of course, that Trump, I think the broad narrative from the right is that it's very positive, and we are glad that there is attention on our plight, on the realities of South Africa, and that finally the untouchable, irreproachable paragons of virtue, which was the ANC, that was politically untouchable for the last 30 years, the veil has finally been lifted, and the world can see them for who they are, and we are not the stepchildren of the world anymore. Finally, they understand they understand the situation in South Africa, I believe, a little bit better. And with the attention from Trump, many people have gone further than Trump's investigations, further than Trump's things he has said. And they have come to do interviews. They have talked to normal people on the ground, people like me. They have talked to big organizations like AfriForum. They have spoken to, like I said, the media has gone out because of Trump's focus on South Africa, and have gone really deeper into many nuances and things happening in South Africa. And Trump's basically created a chain reaction with a media frenzy going into Europe on all manner of things and issues in South Africa. So I believe that is very, very positive. And so then the two perspectives from the right wing comes in. The first one is very positive in the sense that they want the USA, they want the US help, they want to maybe even go to America. They are sick and tired of this country. They are, like you yourself, Afrika, Afrikaners, boere, and they are fed up with this country. They fear for their children, and I mean they're very tired of the constant onslaught we all have to face every day, in whether it's in work, how we have to, when we drive home, the way we have to look at the world, the way we have to constantly be on guard, the way we have to approach our lives. And I mean, I speak to many people from outside the country, the freedom they have, the security they feel. We just don't have that. And I think many people yearn for that. And I think that Trump has finally given them maybe a way out. And I think, yeah, so that is the one perspective that many people feel that they really want Trump's help. They want him to come in, maybe to help us as a nation or pull some of our people out. And then the other one is the, let's say, the more right wing or the more far right or extreme right perspective is that, well, I kind of agree with it in the sense that it is weakening us, especially, let's say, no, let's not focus on the help and the aid or the support he's giving us with recognition and everything like that. Let's just go to the refugee uh, program he has started now. On an individualistic level, it is good for people, and I have total understanding for what's
Mhm.
happening. But as a group, it would be detrimental for us if 75,000, 78,000 people with their families,
Yep.
children, go.
Yeah.
It's a quarter of a million, and we
Yeah.
are a small nation. It would be detrimental as a nation, and as an organization, you look past the individual, you look at the greater good, you look at the longevity of our nation. And I believe if we cannot adequately provide community and sort of cohesiveness in America for the people that go over, it will be, I think, catastrophic for our people. I mean, we lost 38,000 on the high end, women and children during the Second Boer War. And that was for our demographics, it was catastrophic.
Yeah.
Now, just think a quarter of a million of people. I mean, and it's going to be people that have the ability to go. Well,
Yeah.
it's probably going to be mostly young people
Yeah.
that's going to go over. Maybe some older people as well. I don't know, but it's it's going to be detrimental. So that's the other viewpoint. But I believe, um,
I'm really glad you say that, Francois, because I think that's something that's not being said. Is that yes, this has brought the spotlight of the world onto the plight of the Afrikaner. Your voice is being heard, no less by Trump himself. But it seems to me that if people really back and go, that it's a massive bleeding of Afrikaners, of the Afrikaans people. And you've actually just said it yourself now. It will also be your best educated people that you will actually lose in this process as well.
yeah, maybe to a certain degree, but I think the best educated people already left,
Hmm.
and so I think you'll probably lose many of your middle class, lower middle class people. I think many people that don't have too much here in South Africa, not too much property. I think that might also be one of the things. You're not going to be able to take a
No, but
lot
sure.
of
One,
capital
one,
and
one
stuff
thing
like
that
that.
that one should say immediately as well: the USA is not going to take in the homeless Afrikaners. Uh, they
Yeah,
will take in people with qualifications. So you
yeah,
will certainly it will be some form of a brain drain of
yeah. No,
people
definitely, definitely.
that you leave
Yeah.
that you have for the country as a
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah, but but what I'm trying to say is it's not going to be, I think, totally just the let's say the professional class. I believe there's going to be a drain of the middle class and the low middle class as well, which we
Mhm.
haven't really had in the past because the middle class and the low middle class didn't really have the opportunity to go over
Yeah,
because they didn't have the capital. Most of the people that went over were professional people,
yeah, yeah,
people with the capital or the means or the qualifications to go over. But now that spectrum, now it's not just the brain drain; it's bigger than just the, let's say, your. It's more than just that. It's a broader spectrum of the productive part of our people that's going to leave, and yeah. So and I think it's also going to cause a spiral. It's a very difficult um, thing, our position in South Africa. And as a person who is on the conservative or the right wing side, whatever you want to call me, I'm a nationalist. I'm a Boer nationalist or Afrikaner nationalist. But there is certain realities that we face. We have a responsibility to this country. We are a stabilizing force here, and we by leaving, it is not abandoning our duty here in South Africa, but it is very detrimental not just to our people but to our, I think, position in South Africa, where we have for a very long time been a stabilizing consistent force throughout the last 30 40 years, actually the last 200 years, where we have been I think law abiding productive citizens. We have innovated, we have employed people. We do not overrepresent ourselves in crime statistics. um, I believe uh, I think we do more than our part. We are a very, I think, effective part, or a very precious part of this country's demographic. Yeah,
Let
you
me let
understand
me
what I'm
let me
saying?
let me interrupt you here and steer your mind this direction. I said at the beginning of all this when we heard about it, it felt like a sugar rush to me. All this excitement around Trump's statement and refugee status for Afrikaners, but I'm stirring trouble now. Wouldn't you say to Kali Kriel and to Flip Base and to the guys that went out to go and talk in Washington, well, have you thought about what you're doing here? Because part of the outcome is that you're actually draining our people of our people, that we're going to lose some of our very good people to
Yeah.
Donald Trump's invitation, that will have a detrimental long-term effect on the Afrikaner as a people.
And that's the thing, is that we there's a lot of, I think, programs we can do. We can probably say why aren't we doing it, and it's difficult. There's no easy solution, but um, I just think there's so much arm blankers, so many poor whites, Afrikaners in our country. Our working class has been totally destroyed. We do not have a working class anymore. And you see them with these tens of thousands of white people in squatter camps, in white squatter camps. We have many, many more poor and impoverished people. And I would say that maybe some of them should go, because maybe there they would have a life. Maybe there they can lift themselves up again. Maybe there they can become productive citizens again. They don't because there they can, as working class
Yeah,
people, they will
yeah,
have a role. They would have
yeah.
a position. They can have um, a good life. They don't have to. They will have an honest living,
Yeah,
and
but that's not going
and
to
and,
happen, and you know that
and
as
that's
well
the
as I
thing.
know that. That's not going
Yeah,
to happen, and Colin
and
Krill
that's the
knows
thing.
it's not going to
Yeah,
happen. And if we all look at
yeah,
it
yeah,
soberly, then no,
yeah.
it's not going to happen.
Well, but sorry, but can I just say, but in the defense of, I think Kali Kriel and them actually say that they don't want people to go over, as I believe they want the USA to help us here. I believe they got a lot of backlash for that, because many people are like, why are you telling us not to go?
The other thing that I would like to touch on and get your views on, and I really am very keen on hearing your views, particularly because of where you come from politically and because you're a young South African and you're a young Afrikaner, for that matter. How do you honestly think that all of this might have affected our relationships with the other peoples of South Africa, with black people in South Africa? I've said this also to a number of people here. Well, if I was a black man in South Africa, I would feel deeply insulted by all of this.
I don't know if I can talk for them, but I think it might have had a negative effect, in the sense that it has definitely become a political talking point for all the black nationalist or pan-Africanist organizations, the more radical elements under the black organizations. It has become a very prominent talking point for them.
But
They,
let me interrupt
yeah,
you here.
yeah,
It's important what you're saying now. Imagine yourself. Put yourself in the other man's shoe, they say. Imagine you're just an average black guy working at a company in Johannesburg and you go back to your little house in Soweto. How would you feel if you've been told that your people are committing a genocide and you look around you and you see the poverty around you and you see the suffering of your people, and you're just an ordinary man. You're not a politician who's trying to exploit the situation. How would this impact on you?
I I do not know whether that would be the most pressing issue and whether that would be a issue that would really turn someone against us. I do not think that would be the most pronounced thing for them. I don't think that will be at the top of their list for why they don't like us. I think it will maybe just, let's say, strengthen the narrative that of what the politicians are saying, and in that sense, it is definitely that we are sometimes made to be the boogeyman, and we run to the outside world and all that, and now it has maybe been justified, or it has been, yeah, it is now more pronounced maybe for him, you know. I think in that sense, maybe maybe now feeling stronger in his beliefs, but it's very difficult. I can't know what they're saying. I definitely feel that it has negative effects on the relationships. I think that is obvious. I think it is everything that divides people, um, that lifts one group and not above the other. Now we get refugee status, they don't. We are being, let's say, focused on and not all the problems of South Africa. We are now the reason that some of the aid is stopping, and it just strengthens this idea that we are the boogeyman in South Africa. And in that sense, it is very negative. And that's what I'm saying. What I said earlier is that we need to understand that we have this the situation we are in South Africa is very delicate, and I believe that this was quite a drastic change in pace. South Africa is becoming more divided. It is not a, and it will become
Yeah,
more and more
yeah,
divided. And South Africa will be more and more isolated in the international arena if it doesn't act swiftly and strongly. And I do not believe they have the political will. And it will just exacerbate the political instability inside South Africa because of the outside pressure. And we would be forced more and more to align with the pariah states of the world. And it will be a cycle, irrecoverable free fall we would go
yeah,
into.
yeah.
And yeah, and that's the thing. I just feel that we can make moral. Sorry, what last thing? I know I'm talking long. So one last thing is that we can make moral arguments about how the African is going to feel. I believe what I'm going to say now is going to be quite maybe radical, but I believe in the end, you must not just ask how the man on the ground feels. You must ask what is the masses going to do. The 90% of people in this country aren't going to lead, aren't going to push change in politics. It's going to be the 10% who are active. Of course, the 90% is very important, but I think we must rather look at how is this mobilizing the already politically engaged people of
Yeah.
this country?
Well,
How is this
it
implementing
seems to
ideas
me,
like in
Francois, if I may interrupt you here again, it seems to me
yeah.
that whether you're talking about it on from the point of view of the little man or the point of view of those in power, it seems to me in both instances here that the tension has gone up, the tension
For sure.
has
For sure.
risen. That's what I feel literally from here where I'm sitting in Amsterdam. I can literally sense it in what I read and what I see. Um, I want to talk a little bit about yourself, a little bit. As a young child, when you grew up, where did you grow up first and foremost? And when
So,
did you
yeah.
hear for the first time about this thing called apartheid as a young child?
So my family comes from the Kalahari, but I was born and raised in Pretoria.
Hmm.
I spent some time in Harties for about 4 years when my mom was relocated there for work. Um, the thing is, um, yeah, I didn't really grow up in a very politically active um household. My father was a man that grew up very poor. He was never really that interested in politics. He wanted to build a business. He wanted to lift us up. He wanted to provide for his children. He was a lieutenant in the army. He said of course, he learned a lot from there, but he wanted to get going, building his life. And he was an Afrikaner and he was just a normal guy, you know. My mom as well, she was a nurse, when she was young, loved helping people. She worked in the medical field for a very long time. So it was simple people. We weren't at all the cultural events. Sometimes we would go to Geloftedag, and so we didn't really always speak about this. I believe there's a lot of people from that generation that was just not that politically active.
Mm.
They were done with it. They just wanted to. They were very individualistic. Um, it was a very individualistic generation later on.
At what point, when did you hear the word apartheid for the first time as a young child? And what did you learn from your environment growing up about apartheid? What were you taught about apartheid?
I think the first time I really like learned about it was maybe when I was in law school in was it primary school, and like I said, I mean we grew up in Pretoria, in Waverley, in one of the whitest areas in Pretoria. Uh, we had a maid, we had a teen boy of like a garden boy. Um, we went on. We didn't have any, um, but we weren't like I said. We never had that discussions. We never really in our household talked about it. And yeah, so I mean,
What,
we
what
we
did you
went
learn
on.
about apartheid? What was
I
the story that you were told?
The first things the first things learned was in school was about Mandela, the fall of apartheid, the racial segregation laws we had, and well, we knew it was. I didn't really, of course, many young Afrikaner boys. There's I think two ways of thinking. I I was we were historically aware. And
Mm.
my stepfather, he fought in the war as well. He was an active soldier. He he taught us about the war. He taught us about the pride they had. So we didn't really talk about apartheid, the policies and stuff. We talked about, yeah, sometimes we talk about how good it was those days, how life was, how it was safe and clean and good, and and that was my experience. I'm not making a pronouncement about it. That was what we learned. We learned about the men that fought on the border. We learned about uh, the discipline and the honor of the army. And I think when these things were introduced, it was, yeah, there was many. Sometimes there would be. I think it's not that pronounced in my head, but there was some let's say derogatory things said about Mandela, for example. So as a kid, then you have these lessons and you kind of shrug it off, because you don't. I mean, no kid almost. I like history, but many kids they don't really care about history, especially when it's taught at school. You don't really take it in. Um, it doesn't really affect you the history you learn at school that much. It didn't affect me. I followed what we did at house. Many of the kids at my school, I mean, we were 90% white school. Um, we talked sometimes about the past, about how things were, but I don't think it was that prominent as people think it was. It wasn't really that big a discussion point. It wasn't that we talked about the moral complexities of
Can
apartheid. We
I ask
didn't
you this?
really,
Let
yeah,
me ask you this question, and I'm interjecting here because I'm trying to sort of also
yeah,
help guide you through this discussion
yeah.
in a some way at least, as well as um, apartheid was declared a crime against humanity, I think back in 1970, 69 or something like that already. I think later the United Nations reaffirmed it in 84 or something like that. But take note of those words, a crime against humanity that had just been committed. This is why I'm asking this question is I find it astounding and puzzling that you grew up as a young child and you seem to not have been a too terribly aware of that fact and that it was not part of the daily discourse. I would suggest to you, and this is why I'm asking this question, and I'm trying to put you on a spot. I'm trying to really understand that if something so traumatic had happened in the history and the development of a country that the United Nations would call it a crime against humanity, I find it very difficult to understand how come we and our parents and our families did not dissect this and talked about it? Why was that not the major topic of discussion? That's part of my question. And the other part of that discussion is it would appear to me, and maybe I've been away from home for far too long, that one would imagine that these people that had been engaged in this whole thing called apartheid, that they would somehow, people to people, reach out to one another and get to know one another. And that, it seems to me, did not happen in South Africa, apart from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So if you look from very far, I really have a helicopter view of this, and I try to be as unemotional as what I can be about this. Why wasn't there, which I have always imagined there should have been or ought to be, a more profound discussion and dissection amongst ordinary people, black and white, with one another about this traumatic thing that had occurred in their history?
That's a very complex question. Yeah, first, so I think many people, like I said, they were not political. They just wanted to go on with their lives. They were
Mhm.
very individualistic. They wanted to build their companies. They were just glad that the workforce, let's say the market grew. The available market of customers grew. I mean, many Afrikaners became very, very rich after the fall of apartheid because it opened up. I believe it. I think the Afrikaner community kind of isolated, not isolated, maybe mentally isolated itself to a certain degree, didn't really want to talk about it, didn't really want to. There's some, of course, many organizations and people, certain, let's say, circles that, of course, still talked
Yeah,
about it.
yeah.
There was
Well, the
some,
academics and
uh,
the intellectuals and at universities or whatever, those
and maybe
discussions.
the, and maybe some of the right wing organizations and stuff like that, and some
Mhm.
of the cultural events. But I think, like I said, I grew up very simplistically, very unaware of many things that happened, very shielded. We weren't rich or anything, we were a middle class family. I was in very normal schools, but I mean, it was white schools. I was very shielded, and we just didn't really talk about it. I mean, we understood there was a system where whites were one side, blacks were other side, but we didn't really always understand the let's say the ideological basis on which it was argued that and then um, didn't really understand the process why it ended. I think many white children today and black children don't really understand that process. Um, Only many of the people that are, let's say, in the politics also don't understand the process, the oorgangsperiode, when um, let's say kind of the rush it happened in the chaos with the negotiations in the country. They don't understand the political situation that led to this. They don't understand the political history of the country, and because they just don't care. I think it's as simple as that. They just don't care. Just like people in America don't know the history of America. The people maybe in Germany is the only country because they have been made they were really the stepchildren of the world. But even them they don't really understand the political nuances around the
But let's
creation of
let's let's
of-
Francois, let's
yeah,
forget about the political nuances and just talk
yeah.
about the human factor. Let's
But
just
what I'm
talk
saying is
about.
like, sorry, people just don't. It sounds very bad to say because I think there's this connection from that, because we didn't really. I think there's like it's bad, and all the white liberal girls would say it was very bad, and all right wing guys that fly the four color are bad, and they are murderers and killers and racists or whatever, and they are the moral. They can just take the moral high ground because they said it's bad. But I don't
But
think
you're
they
a
really
smart guy.
understand.
You're a smart
Yeah,
guy. So let me ask you a question, and
yeah.
I really think you're a smart guy. Um, Don't you think there's an argument to be made that it is actually in your interest, in your for your very survival, that it's important that you understand what has actually happened in the country and that you also understand how the other had experienced that. And until such time that you can resolve that and give that a place, you cannot ever imagine to move forward. Just
I
on a
think,
very
yeah.
simple basis, is it not in your own interest, for your own survival's sake, very important that you actually do understand what has actually happened on a human level to people. Because this is what I continuously hear from black South Africans is that we were urged just to move on. We were not even allowed to shed our tears. They did not even
Yeah.
give us the space to cry. This is 30 years later.
And
And
yeah, yeah.
I mean, do I make sense or not?
No, you
Or
do,
do
you
I
do for
sound like
sure.
some crazy left-wing radical sitting here
I,
and
I think I understand what you're saying, and to some degree it might be true, but the question was asked is who didn't give them time to shed those tears? Who the as soon as apartheid ended,
how about me giving you some answer there?
yeah,
Um, how about just organizations getting together, churches getting together, social organizations
yeah. I think
getting together and saying, hey, you know what, we've got to talk about this stuff. Because there seems to me that we've not talked about this. We had this little thing called the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. Let me ask you this question. I'm not sure how old you are. You're in your 20s, I guess. Um, how many, as a young, you're living in a country where 80% of the people of that country are black people.
yes.
So how many moments in your life can you refer back to where you can say, here I sat in the kitchen with Zolili or whatever this black person's name is, and had a heart-to-heart talk around a cup of coffee about what has happened to us and where should we go to in the future on a very simple base level, people to people.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I've ever had that discussion with well, maybe a little bit when I was in university, but that was
Hmm.
always very inflammatory and
Hmm. Hmm.
very political, very aggressive.
Yeah.
And it's people that they've never even experienced it. It's people that's as old as me. They were never even through the system. Um, okay, let me, from my point of view, it is not my responsibility. My generation's responsibility is to build up again. My responsibility is to bring together young white men, especially to build them up again. That's what we talked about before the interview. The will of our people has been broken. Um, I believe that we need to have very good relationships with other nations in this country, with the Zulu, the Xhosa, and everyone. I think we must not integrate. I believe there must be respect from both sides. That we are Afrikaners, you are Zulus, and you can be proud of that, and I can be proud of an Afrikaner. And from that basis, as an Afrikaner, I speak to a Zulu, not as a white man, I speak to a black man. As a white man, or as a Boer, or as an Afrikaner, I speak to cultural people, people that are of um, of different groups, and we speak to each other both in love and in honor and in pride in our own identities, in and with respect to each other's um, let's say wants and needs and ambitions in this country. And I believe that I I do not know whether the apartheid question is the main thing keeping that from happening. I believe it has been propped up as a thing for the last 30 years. That is still a problem. And the experience I've had with some black guys in the that are also nationalist has been much more constructive, much more looking forward, and to say that many of them have also gone past that and say, okay, that is our past. We have done things wrong in the past. You have done things in the past. We need to be adults in the room. We need to look at the future for this country. We need to look at a solution for the real problems in this country because South Africa is going downhill by a hell of a pace. We have much bigger problems than uh, I think than just redressing it. I understand that there needs to be maybe some sort of uh, understanding between them, but I'm not gonna, and it's gonna sound very hard what I'm gonna say now. I think apartheid was not the correct system. I believe it was unsustainable. I believe there was many mistakes made. I believe it is the story of man that mistakes were made. I mean, the Americans did much worse than we did. I believe there was many humane things about apartheid, but there was also many things that was just not good, and many things that was just implemented very badly. But there was also many good things about the old regime. Uh, I believe but I'm not gonna say I'm sorry. That's what I'm trying to say. Is that I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna I'm done apologizing for everything. That is not my thing to apologize for. And even if I was there, I would not apologize. I would say, okay, um, well, the people that are there, they they might have apologized, but they are not in the situation we are now. The normal Afrikaans people have taken all the brunt of this attack. It is not the old politicians, it's not the old NP guys, it's not them that bear the brunt of this attack. It's the normal Afrikaans people that lived in a system that they were under, that of course that advantaged them. Many it's like I said, it's the history of the world where there's some group that is advantaged and some that maybe are disadvantaged. And like I said, I think it was an unsustainable system. But by just going back to that the whole time, we are not, I think, ever gonna fix this country by keep going back to that. I can say like, yeah, there's a part in our history and we made mistakes and not everything was perfect about it about that time. But I don't believe that it is as big a problem as many people make it. I think it has become a political sore point for many people, but I think it has been blown up beyond what it should be in the degree that um, young people use it much more than the old people. Young black people are much more angry about it than many of the older black people. And I think we need to understand that this country has a history like any other country. We were put in a union by the British in a country that should have never been this big. It's almost it is um, unreasonable, or it was simple to create a country like it is with the border.
I think it's larger than Europe. I read somewhere
Yeah,
the other day. I'm not quite sure if
than
that's the
Western Europe.
case.
If you take out Spain, it's larger than Western Europe. And the thing is that it is a ridiculously large country with people with multitudes
Yeah,
of different beliefs, very, very varying beliefs. Even the Boer and the Brit. If you put the Boer and the Brit together, they would also not really function. Maybe
yeah,
now
yeah,
after 100 years. But I mean, um, the thing is that we need to understand that South Africa is in a very difficult position. We were placed, we inherited apartheid. Yes, of course. And there was some things that the people, the old government did because there was, of course, they were afraid of what's going to happen if they lost power, like any people is, you know. Of course, there was
it's complex.
misperceptions about what would happen,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that led them to do a lot of things. But
yeah,
apartheid was an impossible situation our people was put in to govern. Apartheid was almost impossible to work. They
yeah.
tried to to govern this country like it was under the British of the Union of South Africa when it was run by Louis Botha in 1910 by the British design was a unsustainable country. It was maybe sustainable when there was a million black people and a million white people, when the demographics was exactly the same.
Yeah,
But the
yeah.
demographics of our people went down so much. But what I'm trying to say is that it was an unsustainable country that we tried to sustain for as long as we can. I think
Francois, let's pick it up there because what you're saying there is really where I wanted to go with you in this discussion anyway, is the workability of it all. Can it ever work? Is really the question. And why I'm asking these questions is it seems to me that there is no, in terms of there seem to be no real connection happening people to people in South Africa. The creation of a nation with shared values or whatever you want to call it. There seems to me, and that's the impression I get from a lot of people that go to the country on holiday and come back here again, or reporters that go there, journalists that go there, that tell me that everybody in South Africa seem to be living in their little bubble.
of course.
Part of part of the question that I want to ask you, and I want to go back to that idea of the multicultural, multiracial ideal. It was and I know today, if one looks back at it, I myself question that as well, is tremendously idealistic, but perhaps enormously foolish, or unworkable, unattainable. And that's really my question to you as a young South African today. involved with politics on whatever part of the spectrum it might be, is this thing called South Africa, this thing called the Rainbow Nation. It seems to me, tell me if I'm right or wrong, that to this point it's just really been an illusion of a country, but not a real nation has not been created. Do
So,
you do
yeah,
you think that that could happen, or you talked about the borders that were drawn back in, what is it, 1911 or whatever the case might be, with the foundation of the
1913, I
Union
believe,
of South Africa?
1913.
Yeah, is it is it unworkable?
It's definitely unworkable. That's the thing, is that South Africa was an imperial colony, basically, of Britain to a certain degree, and the colonies, or Africa, every part of Africa has this problem. There's warring tribes drawn in the same borders. Um, if you ask yourself, what defines a South African? What would you define as South African? Someone that lives in the geographical area within the borders of this country we call South Africa. There's no cultural, no linguistic, no racial connectation between all these people. And if you think the Boer and these other people and the black tribes have difficulty, look at many of the black tribes, many of the African tribes, how they work together. Look how the Khoisan and the Zulu feel about each other. Just those two you should not really put together in the country. And that's the thing, is that it was for administrative purposes by the British Empire that it was created. It was not thought as a country, it was thought of as a colony, and it was created as a colony. And I have a great friend who we had a discussion earlier, and we talked about demographics is destiny. The white man will not survive in South Africa in how it is now. Um, it will just not happen. I believe we will never rule in the way it is now. We will never govern ourselves. We will never have our own legal system. And in that sense, that is the same problem every black tribe in South Africa has. The Zulu will never live under a Zulu system. You will never have a Zulu national anthem, a Zulu flag, a Zulu border that is really his own. So the Khoza, so the Venda and the Pedi and the Sotho. And that's the problem. As long as you try to suppress the nationality of these people and to push them together, and you think that if you push hard enough, you
Yeah,
will force them together, and finally, one day, boom, if the pressure you put on them will create this great jewel in the middle. It's not how it's going to happen. If you keep taking people's nationality, pride away, there's going to be standing up, uprising. And I believe that's this what has happened now is the reaction of the Afrikaner. Whatever our past is, two things I would say about that is, of course, we will want help from the outside world. We are living in stupid conditions. Like, we do not have to live like this. That's the thing. People think we owe everybody everything, and we need to pay taxes for the rest of the country for the rest of time, and we need to build, and we need to help, and we need to do all this stuff. Yes, we have a responsibility, like I said earlier in the
yeah,
program. We are a stabilizing force in this country, but it has been taken for granted. We do not actually owe them that. We are doing it because that is our civilization. That is how we are. But it is actually to this at this stage to our own detriment that we are trying to keep this country afloat. And you can say what you want, but if the white man leaves this country, it will collapse as fast as this. It is a, and the thing is, I think that's what I fear to a certain degree. That why are we responsible for the governance, for the for the running of this country? So in the let's say in the private sector, um, we do not owe them anything. And I believe that that feeling would be mutual under many black
yeah,
tribes because they
yeah.
have become fed up. If you,
Yeah.
I think the
I
litmus
hear
test
what
for
you
this
say.
country.
I hear what you say. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Am I right if I say that you and your generation, and I'd like you to think a little bit broader about how other young people think, perhaps even beyond the scope of Afrikaners, young Afrikaners, how young white people in general terms feel about the situation is we not responsible for the sins of our fathers, is really what you're saying. We
No.
don't have any obligation to our history. is in a sense what you're saying, and perhaps not as
No, no, no,
harsh as what I've.
that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I'm not denying the history of my fathers,
Yeah.
and they did many things, you
But
know.
you don't
Uh,
believe what I'm trying to say, Francois, was you're not saying that I have to pay back, because that's really what it's all about. Is
but that's but haven't we been paying back for the last 30 years with
I hear you.
Sasankrama,
That's why I'm asking
with
you.
EE, with everything?
Do you think that
No.
30 years post-apartheid, one has reached a point where you say, okay, we've paid back, we've acknowledged the sins of the past, we are quite aware of what happened in the country. It's now time for us to move on, and we don't
The,
have any more obligation to black people in South Africa
the
in terms
concept
of
is
our
this.
apartheid legacy.
You say payback, redistribution,
Hmm.
restitution. All these terms means that they had something we took. What was here? What did we take? Did we invade cities? Did
Yeah.
we take over infrastructure? What did we take? What did we steal? There was nothing. We built this infrastructure. We built this country. And they can say, of course, their labor was very part of this. But we created this country that they now inherited.
Hmm.
They inherited everything from us. They inherited the state, the infrastructure, the systems, the government agencies. They inherited everything. What more payment do they want? They got an entire country.
Hmm. Hmm.
We bought an entire country and gave it to them. Now they still want more. They didn't build something and we took it and took all their money and took everything they had. And now it's like a thief that has to pay back because I stole their bike. They always use this thing. If you steal a car and someone buys that car from you, you can take that car because it was originally stolen. What was stolen? They can say land. Okay, maybe you can make that argument, but that is the history of man. Then Germany must be given. Then, if you really want to go back, when do you go back to? Do you go back
Yeah.
100 years, 200 years, 3,000 years? When do you go back to the rightful owners of that land? Conquest, buying, negotiation, all those
Yeah.
things is
Yeah.
how we got the land. So now you can say it's stolen, but maybe you can make an argument for the land that it was theirs and now they have. And if they want to say that, they must say that they have conquered us, that they have won us, and they do not want us in this country. Then they mustn't use beautiful terms like redressing the injustices of the past. Then I must say that we have conquered you. And because we have conquered you, it is our right to take that land because as a conqueror, it is my right. But then they must say that. Then they must say that we have lost. And I believe that is kind of how it is, that we have lost and now they are taking it because it is kind of how it's kind of how history works. It is simple, and that's why we wage wars because we don't want people to take our stuff. But we didn't take anything else. Everything else was given to them. What more should we build businesses now and just give it to them? Wow, we're already doing that. We're building businesses and we're giving 30-40% of those businesses to them. We are giving them everything. And but what I'm saying is that I'm not going to say sorry for the things my fathers did because who am I to reject my father and his history and all he did for this country,
Hmm.
all the blood and sweat he put in this country, the fact that he fought the communists on the border, the
Yeah.
fact that he tried to stop terrorists, the fact that he built infrastructure, the fact that he left me built a great business for us. Um, I mean, I would never dishonor my dad or my forefathers like that. I won't. I will not. What kind of son uh, says sorry for his dad? I mean, your dad really has to be bad. And of course, there was many things that happened. But what I'm saying is that I'm done saying sorry. That is not my. That our generation is done saying sorry. Oh, there's some liberals that want to say sorry the whole time and want to. It's 30 years. We've given them the entire state. What
Yeah.
more restitution would you want to give? And it's the same in America. If you if you want, they want also want money and stuff there. If you really want to be placed in the situation you were before slavery, then they must send you back to Africa because that's what you had before your forefathers came. Now it's very hard to do. It's very tough to hear that, but it's not like it didn't steal something. Now they want to put a monetary thing on the suffering of the past. Maybe you can make an argument for that, but
Okay. I
what is
hear
that?
you,
Because then we can
Francois.
go and say the British must pay us back for killing
Yeah.
38,000
Yeah.
of our
No,
people.
I hear you. But the question that is on the table at the moment is where to from now? How do we deal with this reality? Do we continue believing in the idea of the Rainbow Nation? South
No,
Africa has this within the boundaries that have been drawn in 1911 or whatever case the case might be. This is the South Africa that we will maintain for the future. Do we hold on to the ideals, whatever that might mean, of the multiracial, multicultural democracy, or what is the solution?
I
Which
believe it is.
direction do we
Um,
go? I mean, do we then go back to the idea of the creation of what would resemble the homeland system that was declared the enemy of the entire international community when it was started by the National Party? What is the answer? That's one question. The other question, just very quickly, is that, and I really feel your passion, and I hear what you say, and I really it registers in my mind what you're saying, and the content of it is important to be heard. But apart from talking in your own circle, with your own friends within the Bittereinders or your family, or is this discussion that you and I are having right now? Are we having this discussion with the 80% of South Africa's population as well?
okay, so firstly, the solution to South Africa, I believe that nations, peoples should be respected and they should work with each other as peoples, as their own, um, uh, let's say, unique peoples.
Mm.
You need to understand that there needs to be, for people to survive, for a people to survive, they need to be separate to a certain degree. And the more separate they are, the more likely they are to survive, I believe. Um, the Zulu and Afrikaner can work together or can work with each other, but it must be as a Zulu and an Afrikaner, not just I think as South Africans. You can't
Mm.
force everyone into this monotheistic,
Yeah.
this uh, this conglomerate of peoples in one place and think all these cultures that have very, very, very radical differently ideas will all just magically work together and will sing kumbaya. People will draw to communities of their own. The Afrikaner will make their own communities. The Zulu will get together in certain areas. That is the natural. Of course, there's some tribes of the black people that really integrate with each other a lot. Yes, that it happens, you know. But I believe for this country to have any future that is not catastrophic, there needs to be the utmost respect and understanding and legitimization of peoples, uh, so that they do not feel disenfranchised, that they do not feel the need to go overseas, they don't need to feel the need to lash out, they feel, so that they can work together as, like I said, um, equal parties in trade, in business, in whatever situation it be. I believe some sort of federal state would be the best solution, where the people don't feel disenfranchised, where people feel that their voices are really heard. Because if people do not feel their voices are heard for a very long time, that causes a lot of unrest, and that's what's happening in South Africa. It's a simmering under the words. It's a simmering. It's simmering, and at one point, it's going to boil over because um, people build up animosity towards each other, to the government, and because I think it's a French saying. It's a very French saying. That's saying that rioting is the voice of the unheard, and it's
Mm.
very that is if you keep taking the voice of people, telling them that it doesn't matter what you say, shutting them down, shutting them up when they try to raise legitimate things or questions or um, problems. They are going to lash out. They're going to react at one point, and it is inevitable. That's how people are, you know. And that's what I'm trying to say. And I think it goes both ways. I think there's some black people that feel the same way, maybe towards us and maybe towards the government, you know. Um, I do not speak to a lot of black people. I have many friends that have extensive, well, let's say, well, I can maybe call them friends, but people that I speak to that have extensive conversations with black people. And some of the questions you raise is valid. There is still um, the chip on the shoulder for them. There is still mm, problems that lingers from the past.
Yeah.
But I think it is exacerbated by the fact that it has become a political talking point for the last 30 years. And we haven't taken on
Yeah.
the culture of let's try really to move forward, because we haven't really moved forward, because everything in our country is racial. Every aspect of our
Yeah.
society is still racial. 30, 30 years later, this country is just as racial. There's more racial laws now. Every business is racially aware.
Yeah.
Every day you have some sort of thing about some sort of interaction about race. Race is in every day. It's so prominent in our country,
All right.
and that's the problem.
Sorry if I interrupt. I'm also just thinking about time and time constraints.
Yeah.
What I hear from you and what I'm taking out of this, and I observe it around me as well, and a lot of people on both the left and the right might be very angry with the conclusion that I've come to at this point. Because I said to somebody else, I've gone full circle in the time of apartheid, I've gone full circle in the time of freedom, etc. I seem to be keep on going in full circle, and the new full circle, in my understanding, talking to people like you, talking to the Andili Masitamas of this world, listening to what's going on in South Africa, I come to the conclusion that and I want you to tell me yes or no, the idea of the Rainbow Nation is unworkable. Is that a yes or a no from you?
I believe it has never been tried.
Never been tried. You would not say the last 30 years had been an attempt to create a rainbow nation. And we're not actually sitting here at this very moment and saying that 30 years later we come to the conclusion, as I deduct from what you've just told me now, that it's just not working.
No,
It's
no,
just
it
not
has never been
working.
tried. It has never been tried
Explain that to me.
because if what happens on a painting palette, if you take all the colors of the rainbow and you mix them,
I get you.
it becomes brown.
Yeah.
A rainbow, there's every color in its own specific place, in its own glory,
Hmm.
in its own beauty.
Hmm.
And I believe that is the only thing that would work in this country, is maybe the true rainbow nation of the colors, the peoples, the cultures being in their own line, in a sense, their own place, so that that is what makes a rainbow beautiful, in a sense, is the fact that everyone has their place in this country. And what I'm trying to say is not to deny the lived experience of the black man in South Africa. But what I'm trying to say is that we have never tried that. We have
Yeah.
never made a country like that where we really say, what is the culture? What is all these cultures we have in this country? Um, and are they separate? Are they being really upheld? Is the colors fading maybe now? But it has just been moshed from the start. And it will never, that's not the rainbow.
Yeah.
That's just
Yeah.
a brown mess.
Yeah, I think I'm glad that you insisted on making this point, and I think you're making this point very, very clear. And I find that actually quite beautiful as well, what you describe. I find it a kind of an ideal that I can fully embrace and fully understand. The complication just becomes in how do you create that? Are you talking about geographically, or how do we create that rainbow nation?
There definitely has to be a geographical uh, element to it. Doesn't have to be the entire elements to it, but there definitely has to be a geographic element to it. There needs to be autonomy of people, so that if they feel they want to, and like I said, it can be a federal system, it can be total independence, but um, the thing is, people need to feel that they are heard, that they can live out who they are, that they are not being suppressed. And I believe for that to happen, there needs to be geographical autonomy. There needs to be, like I said, a federal system where the peoples can decide how they run their schools, how they run their like the local or state governments, and the let's say parliaments, or what the state parliament. I think it is very important that people can live that out, and I believe as soon as you mix people, uh, there will always be disenfranchised people and a dominant people. It will always happen, and that is very unsustainable. It creates very unstable societies, and at one point, it just becomes dominance, and that's how people are, you know. And of course, just like we did during apartheid, we kind of forced our culture. They also forced their culture, and it is kind of the human way. As soon as you get in power or you get forward, it is the most natural thing to
Yeah.
basically grow out your beliefs. I mean, it's just like in a you every person that wherever they are, they want their group identity to grow, and they will use the things that they have to their advantage to them that tot their beskikking or to that they have. They will
Mhm.
use that to grow their group identity or their
Yeah.
culture or their religion, and that is the most human thing, and it is inevitable that it will happen, and it has happened in South Africa for the last 100 years
Yeah.
in whichever
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Francois. Um, if if I say this, if I take this part of our discussion and I put it on the desk of, I think 80% of my friends on Facebook, as an example, my little sample of my Afrikaans friends, uh, I imagine that they're going to totally reject the idea and they will say, you're talking to some crazy right winger with some crazy ideas. It will never work. We are quite happy to live within a multicultural democracy with a very strong constitution, and we have one of the strongest constitutions in the world. We can live by the rules of that constitution. So my question is, to what an extent is what you're saying, which I fully understand and I fully respect. I really do respect your really beautiful vision of this rainbow that you've painted here. Um, my my view on it in terms of my contacts with South Africans would be that it would be a minority view that, like Tucker Carlson said to Aaron's Roots, it ain't never gonna happen.
Mm. So I definitely agree with you. During the fall of apartheid, the main proponent against an Afrikaner homeland was not the black person. It was not, and I might get flack for it. It was not Mandela. It was the white man. It was the Afrikaner, which was the main proponent against a homeland. Not all of them, but some of them, especially in the leading structures, were the main proponents against the homeland. They blocked it. They stopped the pressure coming from certain groups to create a homeland. And yeah, you can say what you want. That is the reality, you know, and it's still to a certain degree a reality today. But that is the thing. It is there's individual realities and cultural or people realities. As a people, it is totally unsustainable for us to live within the currents of Africa. Like I said, demographics is destiny. We have seen that, like I said, it is the most human thing to prop up your own beliefs, your own group, wherever you go. That is, or they want to either grow their community with people or they want to grow their community with power and influence. That it is an inevitable human action. It is has been so throughout human history. It is natural. Just like the Christians, they want to build our Christianity. We want to build our Christianity. We say the kingdom of God. We want to build that community. And it's also like again a natural thing. It is the most natural thing that nations want to build the power of the nation, make themselves stronger,
Yeah,
um, uh, uh, to kind of ensure the survival and the how the nation flourish, the advantages of just like a father wants to build a greater business so that his sons may inherit. And that's what I'm trying to say is it is the human reaction, the most human thing to do is to build out your influence, build your to let your worldview spread, let your religion spread, let your language spread. That is human.
yeah,
And that is what will happen in every country. And that's why demographics is destiny. That is why the for the individual businessman, which I believe will be your friends, I do not imagine not no with no offense that you would have too many working class or low middle class friends. As as I believe you will have many academic and well accomplished friends. But the thing is,
well,
and they would have,
you've just proved to me that you are not a very good judge of who I am. I'm
okay,
very
but
much
maybe sorry,
a middle class South African, but be it
but
as it may, let me make your
yeah,
point.
okay, sorry. But what I want to say is that for the it's not it's gonna kind of be at the cost of the individual, and that's why they would never go. Because it is still very good in this country, and the perception of nationhood, of peoplehood, has changed. We have become very individualistic. I would not change myself. I would not offer. I would not give. I would not answer the call um, for the greatness or the advancement of my people. We have lost that sense of nationhood, and I believe that is one of the proponents why the geographical autonomy is very difficult to achieve. It is, I think, almost impossible. But I believe what I'm trying to say is that I think that is the only way in the long term for us to survive. And as a nation, not as individuals, for example, because individuals can have children and go on, but their identity, their group identity will die out and change. The children will not be Afrikaners or Boere. They would be South Africans, or they would be Australians, or they would be Americans. For if we want not just individual to survive, but the Afrikaner people to survive, the idea, the culture, the history to survive, that is what we need to do, and it will take immense, unimaginable human courage, sacrifice, and willpower to rebuild our people. And whether we have that willpower, I kind of doubt. And it's a very hard thing for me to say. And that's what I wanted to say earlier. Is that we are trying to rebuild the will of our people. Our will has been broken. 120 years ago, 100 and almost 30 years ago, we fought against the British for 3 years. Our women and children were put into camps. Um, our farms were burned down, our livestock taken, and we still fought on because we had the will of lions. We wanted to be free. We wanted to be independent. We want religious autonomy. We wanted to govern ourselves. But that will has been taken away from our people. And I believe it was the same war that took us out of the Cape. It was the same war that 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 created our people. But we have lost it. And I believe, of course, there's many things that can create that will again. And like you said, 80% of people will not go. And it's a reality we must face. But like I'm trying to say, it's if we want to survive as a people, if you want this country to be stable, I believe that is and I do, and once again, we need that, I think, for this country to be stable. Our country needs to make very drastic and radical changes. We need to change our mindsets, and we need the political will to change this country, but we do not have it. The ANC does not have the political will to enact the changes that would be necessary to put this country on the right path again. And again, just like they don't have the political will, many of the people don't have the will, I think, to really address this country in all seriousness, to put it back on the course we
Yeah.
need to be. And the same thing, the Afrikaner don't has, I don't think we have the will anymore to move away, to really rebuild and to save our people. And it's a very sad thing to say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I really feel what you say. Um, Economic freedom, and we're going to have to start getting more compact now
Yeah,
because
yeah,
we're really
sorry.
running out of time. But if all the majority of the people of South Africa could be eventually, finally, economically liberated, uh, would that take away this need for this separate colors of the rainbow that you quite beautifully explained to me? In other words, what I'm saying to you is that if if we can economically grow the country to a point at which we can really, really, truly have an impact on the poverty and deprivation of people in South Africa, will that change the outcome?
No, I do not believe so. I believe, firstly, it will never happen. It won't happen. Unfortunately, I think there would be much more peace in this country, and there would be peace between the peoples of this country if that would be true to a certain degree.
Mhm.
Um, but I would still not want to live between everyone. I don't want to live between British as well. I don't want to go to America. I mean, I can go to America or to Europe maybe and go work there. Many people can, but they decide to stay because they love our country, they love our people, the Boer people, the Afrikaner people. And even if there's economic advantages, and what I'm trying to say is that the, it's kind of like a liberal idea that as long as, and it's not just maybe liberal, but it's like a very modern idea that the only thing you need is economic stability and economic prosperity, and then everyone will be happy. It's not the truth. People need culture, they need identity, they need religion, they need community and families to be happy. That's what really makes people happy. That's where people really find their identity, and that's where uh, a very long-term happiness, I believe, and a profound happiness and fulfillment comes from. And we are being sold a lie that if economics are sorted out, everything else will be dandy and lovely. But that's not the truth. There has been people in very rough times throughout history, in extreme poverty, that have worked together, that have had good lives, in very, very tough conditions because they had many other things that made them, that, like I said, that really deep sense of happiness, that really deep sense of fulfillment, and destiny, to have children, to participate in the community in a constructive way, to keep alive your bloodlines within your people, um, to keep alive the history of your people, to build out your people's influence around the world, to build a great nation. I think those things are much more important than economic factors. On an individual level, many people might say, yeah, but then I'll live here. But I mean, like I said, you can see it in Europe. In Europe, many things, many people, many Europeans are very economically well off, but they are sad, they are lost, they are empty because their culture has died. And it's the same thing here, that we have forgotten the things that make men great. They have forgotten the real fundamentals, the real basis of humanity and of human beings. And they think you can just skip that. You think you can recreate it. But the base of all culture, of all identity, is in your race. It is, then it goes to culture, then it goes to religion and community and whatever. But the thing I'm trying to say is that whether we have the greatest economy, I would still want our people, even if we were below the GDP per capita in our own place than South Africa, I would still say let's do it. Because once again, it's not about the individual, it's about the group, it's about the people. And that's the thing.
It's going to have to be my last
Yeah.
question
Yeah,
to
sorry,
you.
I've been.
I understand and appreciate what you're saying. What I take out of here, and I seem to get that confirmed. And maybe I guess people will say, Johan, you're talking to the wrong people. So maybe I am talking to the wrong people. But what I am beginning to formulate for myself is that the idea of the multicultural democracy, the rainbow nation, that seems to be pretty much in danger as we stand right now. And the question I keep on going back to, Aaron's Roots has just created, I think, the pioneer movement now. Um, and let me say before I ask you the question, one of the arguments that I've always had is that uh, the Afrikaans culture, the Afrikaans language, has never lived as much as what it is growing as much as what it has during the last 20, 30 years. There's more books being published in Afrikaans. There's more Afrikaans television available. There's more created in Afrikaans. You have all the space to live out your Afrikaner identity under this constitution that has been created in 1992, 1994. One of the arguments I've always had is that the removal of apartheid and the creation of the multicultural democracy gave you the space to actually be an Afrikaner again. I come back just to what is it that, and let me then point the finger to Aaron's Roots here. What can Aaron's Roots put on the table that you don't have yet in South Africa outside of a geographical piece of land, like an Urania or whatever the case might be, a little space that you can tread on the earth and say, this is my land, this is my space. Outside that, what can you want more, demand more, or create more in movements like the Pioneer Movement or AfriForum or Solidarity?
First, let me say, I don't think
I hope
I'm
my
super
question is
like,
clear to you amidst all
yeah, yeah,
this
no, it's
garbage
very
that I.
clear. It's very clear. So firstly, I think the term the wrong people is very um bad to use because I mean everyone has their opinions, and like you said, maybe that is like you need to speak to people to understand the world. And my perspective is just as valid as anybody else's.
Yeah,
How crazy it might be, or how whatever you might think about it,
absolutely. I
it's
agree
my perspective.
100% with you, which is why
And
I'm talking to you.
yeah, and that's why people have totally lost that, like that sense of understanding towards one another. To say, well, like, and that's like it is almost in a sense the liberals almost have it much more black and white. You don't speak to the right wing. They are very bad, and
Absolutely.
we are the
Hmm.
arbiters of good and evil. We are the paragons
Yeah.
of virtue, and that's not how it should be. We are all fallible. We all have, like I said, my ideas are very idealistic, maybe all not always practical. I'm speaking from my heart, and of course, that is what we want to achieve one day. Um, and that is, like I said, my opinion and my lived experience. And that's the same thing with when I was a child. I mean, what I said, what my experience was with learning about apartheid and everything. But well, I'll answer your question now quickly. I do not believe that there's any solution that Aaron's Roots can bring to the table that would work. South Africa is doomed, unfortunately, if there isn't radical change. Um, and like I said, once again, there isn't a political will. Uh, there is not a will among people to go through that change, and that is unfortunate. And it will create a more dire situation. Whatever we build up will be always in doubt. It will always be in danger. And the only institution, the only thing, and that is what my organization believes, that we can build up, that they cannot tear down, that they cannot steal or take or conquer, is our will. Our will to be a people, to be free, to stand up, to preserve our culture. That is the only worthwhile thing, I believe, to build. Of course, it is great to build institutions, but it is fallible. It can be burned down, it can be outlawed, it can be whatever. But and that is still, I believe, not the problem with our people. Our people's will has been broken, and that is the primary reason for why we are where we are. That is the reason why our people are leaving this country. That is the reason why we won't do what is needed to really be a free people, to really have long term security and prosperity. And we stand in front of a great challenge. And I do not believe we are ready. We can do many small things. We can build all the institutions. We can give all the nice letters to the president and all these people. But there's only one real thing. We need to build young men who are strong, confident, believe in the future of our people, and that really want to achieve something great within our people and for our people. I
Yeah.
believe that is the only, like I said, infallible uh, thing we need to build. I think
Okay, but
everything else is
let's just
futile.
let's just conclude with this.
Yeah.
You talk about you use the word a radical solution. What would that radical solution be? Are you then talking about, as Willem Petzer said to me, balkanization of South Africa, or as Dan Ruud is talking about the canonization of South Africa, like the canton or cantonization of South Africa, a canton system? Short of any of that, there it appears
No,
to me is just
our
doom
people will
and
not survive.
gloom and
I think, like I said, I think South Africa is a ticking time bomb. I believe that the ANC has used up all their political credit. They have made promises and promises and promises, and one day the rooster is going to come to a hatch. I don't know what the English term is, but one day, what I don't, I think that's what it is. But
I
the
get it.
rooster can't hatch. Sorry, but I mean, but anyways, but one day they're going to come and they're going to ask, where is the results of all the promises you've made? And it's going to happen. Yeah, many people say it will never happen. That's what happened in Zimbabwe. People forget it was 20 years since Mugabe took power before the farms were taken. Because the political um, points, the political currency they had ran out. They didn't have more things. They didn't have more VAT to raise. They didn't have more promises to make. They didn't have more ribbon to cut in front of toilets that cost 2 million and was one little or little shack
Yeah.
toilet.
Yeah.
That things caught up to them.
Mhm.
And the thing is that the ANC is making too many mistakes and not doing almost anything right. They are alienating one of our biggest trading partners, I believe, in fact, our biggest trading partner, which the only one that actually has a surplus, I think, towards that we have a trade surplus with, and not a trade deficit with. I think we have a trade deficit with China, with Russia, and I think with Iran. The only ones we have a trade surplus with is the European Union and the USA, and we are alienating these people with a country is whose economy is already very, very bad. So we are isolating ourselves by idiotic, ideological and political maneuvers that is grandstanding for some reason, and it's alienating the Western world, which has
Yeah.
been our only and it's creating, and in the same time there's internal pressures building. And like I said, I do not think the ANC has the will to radically change the internal structure of South Africa. And I believe the more pressure that comes from inside this country, the more radical the ANC is going to become. The ANC is not going to give up power, and that's my opinion. But I do not think the ANC will just give up power. They have played now nice with the DA and everything, but they won't allow too much radical change. They won't really change. They won't give up power. They might give the appearance of it. But the thing is, as soon as their power is really in danger, I believe we're going to see the teeth of the ANC for the first time in 40, 30 years. And he's going to come out, and it's going to come out very scary. He's not going to be the guy dancing there on the stage, singing or laughing and stuff. I think we're going to see the teeth of the ANC, and I have no trust that the ANC, that this country has a political solution. And like I said, the only thing we can do is get our young men ready, get our heads ready, and if we think we have a solution or we know what's going to happen in this country and how it's going to play out, we are totally naive. What we can do is to get our people ready to stand up, to maybe move to Orania, to get geographical, to go I mean, to believe in these ideas and to be ready for whatever scenario can come. In that scenario also includes a stable South Africa. That if South Africa is stable, that these men have the ability to build businesses, to to build families, to be part of a community. And that's not just it's not just negative. It's also to say that how are we building productive young men that can sustain the winds of change that is going to come in this country.
Do you believe that there will be an Afrikaans school left standing in 100 years from now in South Africa?
There has to be. There has to be.
Okay, I'm not going to try to get a yes or a no out of you on that,
Okay,
but
yes, yes,
I can.
yes, yes, yes,
Thank you very
yes.
much. Okay, Francois, great meeting you. Great talking to you. Thank you
Yeah.
very, very, very much.
Uh,
I really hope that this helps, and is I really want to talk to as many as possible South Africans to continue this discussion to try to find solutions. Thank you very, very much. I really hope to see more
yeah.
of you again in the future.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
bringing me on, and sorry for the long. Yeah, sorry, my head was still a little bit getting warmed up at the start, and I like to talk, and while I talk, I reason things, so I tend to talk very long, so I
Yep.
apologize for that.
No,
And
no, no
uh,
apologies. From my side, the more voices we listen to, the better it is for the future of South Africa. Thank you very much.
yeah,
We'll
sure.
talk to each
Thank you
other
very much.
soon. Thanks so much.